Yep, somehow this is one of those projects where every step ends up in chaos. I was just about to leave for the city to get some fabric for the top and zippers for the pants when I decided to check my stash of mock-up fabrics. But then I found a fabric that might actually work for the actual top itself. It is white, it is quite sturdy, and there is more than plenty for both a mock-up and an actual top. So even if I screw up once, I can retry it. So instead of going to the city, I ordered the zippers for the pants online, and I guess we can start actually crafting. For the pants, we had already selected this purple fabric. And I also found this perfectly matching fabric to be used as a lining for the pockets. The fabric cutting is pretty straightforward, but as I do want the pants to end up a bit higher than the original pattern, I added 4 cm on top, which is marked with pins. After cutting all of it, the pieces that would form the top band get some iron-on interfacing so they won't stretch and keep their shape a bit better. After the pants, we can also cut the top. The front is cut from a single layer of fabric, as we only need one of them, and the back piece is cut double layered as usual. It has been a while since I fully thread traced the project, but the front of the top definitely needs it. So many lines that need to be put together precisely, and these can't really be marked with pins either. But once you are in the swing of it, it is a quite satisfying task to do. Plus, with the rather large stitches, it goes quite quickly. So 1.5 days later, and it is fully thread traced. Now that we have this, we can start to put it together. It's also where it gets interesting and where it assumes you have sewing knowledge, because the only instructions that you're getting for this is this. Form the tucks from the top downwards, and on the back side of the fabric, make overcast stitches here and there, only on the seam allowances. So maybe secretly off camera, I've already pinned it together completely, just to check if there's anything else that I need to do before, well, finally pinning it together. And the answer is yes, I need to do one more thing, because when all of this starts interweaving, there is a lot of excess seam allowance. So I think I'm gonna cut off all these bits to about 1.5 centimeter, and then we can really start to put it together. And of course, there was another thing that needed to be done before folding. It wasn't mentioned in the book, but after cutting off the seam allowance, I figured it was a good idea to finish the fabric edges. So I zigzagged those. Then it was actual folding time. And honestly, I really loved doing this. It isn't too difficult to do. All the lines are already in place and you just need to alternate right and left to match line to line. Plus, it is one of those moments where you can see everything starting to come together. Then, hand sewing time. I think that here and there that the book mentions isn't enough. So I'm sewing all of the seam allowances together along the entire length. There we go, fully pleated and overcast at the back. However, there are two things that I already noticed. One is that this kind of garment would definitely benefit from a lighter weight fabric than what I'm using at the moment. It's a bit more pleated than I'd like. On the other hand, this is also the mannequin, which although a close fit is not my exact measurement, so it should fit a bit better on me. So for a next time, I suppose, this could be done in a lighter weight fabric. However, that will also be more translucent, and that's not what I want at this moment. Yes, I could also make a more translucent fabric and make a lining in it. However, I don't really have the time for that now. The other thing is something I'm wondering about with the fact that I only overcast the seam allowances at the back. I'm really curious how well this is all going to hold when I actually take out all of the pins. Because there is, at the moment, nothing really holding these pleats in place other than, well, the edges of the seam allowance. So let's take out all these pins and see how well the garment actually holds. I'm not entirely sure how much better this is. Yes, the fact that the pleats are opening up already makes it look less stiff and bulky and more like the actual thing, which I really like. But I'm not entirely sure about this, because this one opens up really far. I mean, I can almost open it up entirely and then it just looks weird here. So I'm not entirely sure what I should do with that. Maybe I should sew it closed a bit more, like up till here or something. And then we also have this one here. So basically the two that have to end somewhere halfway instead of going all the way to the end. I don't know, I think I'll have to puzzle and play around with it a bit and see if there's a way to make this slightly neater. By playing around with it, I also realized something else which already fixes quite a lot of the issues. And that is that I put it wrong on the mannequin. It had to be a lot higher because my bust points were here, not here. So that fixes it quite a bit already, and hopefully the rest is fixed when I actually put it on me instead of on the mannequin. I think I also know what I'm going to do for the pleats that are opening up. We of course drew all the lines, not all the way to the top, but somewhere halfway, which is where I put in all the pins. And I think I'm going to sew the pleats closed up until that point. Not in a way that you can see it from the front, but as the pleats are double layered of fabric, I'm going to sew this bit to the back of the pleat fabric so that you won't see it on the front. Which means more hand sewing. And that already looks a lot better. The pleats stay in place, but they still have the volume that looks pretty for this layered pattern. Which means that we can put the rest of the top together. And with this small amount of pieces, that goes pretty quickly. With those 3 seams attached, it is time to start looking at the way to close it and to finish it, because as we learned from the mock-up, I need the shoulder and the side open to put it on and to take it off. So after sewing these 3 seams closed, it's time to think about what we want to do next. And with closing it also comes the question on how do we want to finish the armholes, the bottom and the neckline. For that I was thinking about bias tape. I already cut and ironed these bias strips of 1 centimeter wide, which I love for stuff like the neckline and the bottom. But as I was thinking of closing the shoulder and the side seam with snaps, I think 1 centimeter isn't really wide enough. That's very small for these kind of snaps. So that means I have to think about what I want to do next. Also from this moment on, it's just chaos and me thinking out loud. That's basically my process. I just think of stuff and try and see if it works. And then either I have to redo it or it works. As I did already have the strips that I cut for the bias tape, but I did not iron them yet and I don't really want to cut more. I figured maybe I can actually still use these to close up the side seams. I think I do want to have them visible here at the top. So I was thinking, what if I sew the snaps on the back and then just finish the edge with a wider bias strip here on top. It probably doesn't really make sense now, and we'll just have to see how well it works when we actually try it, but I think that's what I'm going to do. When using snaps, the fabric will overlap, and I'm only going to finish the top layer that will be visible with the bias tape. So on the bottom layer, the only finishing is to zigzag the edge and fold it over, after which 1/2 of the snaps can be sewn on. To make sure it would stay closed, I'm using 5 of them, which means quite a bit of hand sewing. So meanwhile, time to start the construction of the pants. Which should be easy enough, right? I mean, these pants is just a standard pattern, so we can just follow the instructions and we should have pants, right? Yeah, well no. I looked at the instructions and how to put in the pockets did not make any sense to me. Plus, I ordered the zippers. I ordered zippers of 15 centimeters, which I got a zipper of 15 centimeters, except that the actual zipper part is only 12, so they're a lot shorter than what I need. Which is why I already made them on 1/2 of the pants, just because I have to figure this out myself, and it could be neater, but at this moment, I really don't have time to order longer zippers or to redo it, so let me show you what I did and how I put in these pockets. These pants have multiple pattern pieces with a seam where the pocket will end up. So first, these are sewn together at the edges, leaving enough room for the zipper, which can then be pinned in and basted in place, after which the pocket lining is attached to one side of the zipper tape and the second half of the pocket attached to the other side of the zipper tape. Then it is top stitched next to the zipper, securing the pocket pieces in place. The 2 pocket halves are attached together and the edge is finished. With that, we have a full pocket. And at this point, I'm done sewing on 1/2 of the snaps of the top, and we can get started on the other half. For this, the bias tape is attached to the edges right sides together. With things like this that need to lay flat, it is very important to properly iron it. Then the snaps can be sewn on, and to make sure we won't see any stitch lines on the outside, the bias is hand sewn into place. This took quite a while, but as it is a chill bit of sewing, I do that in the evenings, which means that during the day we can continue on the pants. For which the next step is to sew the crotch seam together, which also had an interesting set of instructions, but I'll leave those out because otherwise it would become way too much. Because after this, we get an interesting bit of sewing for the middle waistband part, which is definitely a case of reading properly and some careful pinning. Especially the back is interesting, as the big pattern also has darts on the seams the waistband attaches to. This is another reason I'm happy I made the mock-up, because this time I can do it without making various mistakes and having to unpick bits. Then we can get to sewing the pant legs together and we have something resembling pants. Meanwhile, on the top, I arrived at the armholes, which follow pretty much the same steps as the side seams, but luckily without having to hand sew the snap buttons. And to close the pants, we can insert a bigger zipper in the side seam, which again... But really, these zippers, I don't know what they were drinking when they were making these instructions, but it's just not correct. What they want me to do is just not gonna work. These instructions are in Dutch, so I'll sort of translate them, but what they want me to do is quite literally what I have done. Fold the seam allowance to the inside, put the pants right side on the table, put the zipper under it, stitch the decorative seam from the right side at 0.75 cm from the zipper, and then, as close to the zipper as possible, stitch the zipper to the seam allowance only. But that's not gonna work. I don't know what they were thinking, and already had a similar problem when putting in the pocket, so I thought it was just a misprint here. And there is another one, where they want me to put both the pant legs together completely, and after that, do the decorative seam on the inside seam of the pant leg. And as I guess most of you know how a sewing machine works, you can't stitch all the way from there to the top on a sewing machine without also stitching the bottom. So I don't know what they were drinking when they were making these instructions, but it's just not right. Anyway, I am somewhat running out of time, so I guess I'm just gonna leave it for now, even though these pieces of fabric are very loose. If I finish everything on time, I can still try and by hand stitch the zipper tape to just the back of the seam allowance, but that will take a while and it's something that I'm not gonna enjoy doing, but oh well. I guess let's just continue putting these pants together and see when we actually manage to finish them, if that's before I leave or... yeah, let's not think about that. Then it is time to put the sturdy inner part of the waistband together, which finally is pretty straightforward. After sewing all of the pieces together, they can be lined up with the seams of the pants and sewn all around the top edge. Then the bottom edge is folded over and it is top stitched all around the edges of the middle pieces. To secure the edges in place, I hand stitched them to the zipper, which was also not mentioned in the instructions. And here we are. According to the instructions, all that remains is to put a hem in the lower part of the pant legs and we're done. But as you might be able to see, there are still some pins in here. And that is because I do not agree with what they call done. Again, there are some instructions missing. Let me show you. We folded over the top part and there is decorative stitching on the outsides of the front and the back. But that doesn't go all the way around because there is no seam here. And they tell nothing about how to finish this bottom edge and this bottom edge. All that is mentioned in the description is that when you put these decorative seams in, you've sewn on the bottom edge of this band. I do not agree with that. But again, there isn't a whole lot that I can actually attach this to because you would see that seam line here. So I think what I'm going to do to make sure that this seam allowance doesn't pop out again, I'm just going to sew this seam allowance flat, and then whenever I encounter a side seam or any other seam allowance, I'm gonna stitch it to that, and hopefully that will be enough to keep this down. I can also do that with parts where the pockets are sticking out and other seams and such. So let's do that and then we're actually almost done. And for that, I check the length at which I want the pants to end and finish the bottom by turning the edges twice. Sew a small seam through them and done. At this moment, I also realized I hadn't thought about a jacket. But I figured I can reuse the jacket that I wore for my first Greylight run. However, it is made with fake leather and pretty much falling apart. but that should be salvageable. First, removing as much of the crumbling fake leather on the inside as possible without damaging the outside, which wasn't fully successful. But I don't need the jacket fully repaired, just stable enough to survive one more event. So how can one seal fake leather with something that stays somewhat flexible but is invisible? Well, wood glue. For this you can dilute wood glue and liberally apply it to the crumbling leather. Yes, it becomes stiffer and less comfortable, but for now, with this time crunch, it will have to do. And to be honest, I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. I'll probably call this the end of the jacket anyway and toss it after this event. Here we are, tomorrow morning at 6 AM. I gotta be at the station to leave to Finland. I want to start packing my bag and well, the pants are done, the jacket is serviceable, the top is not done yet. Nearly all of the edges are bound, but we still need to do the entire bottom edge, and of course I need to remove all the thread tracing. And I don't think I'm gonna get that finished today because I also gotta run some other errands, so I think I know what this is getting to. I'm going to try and do all the machine work on this today, but I guess I gotta pack a hand sewing kit with me. The machine work that still needs to be done is pretty quick. Just the bias tape that needs to be attached to one side. And after that, a round of ironing. I also think that the folds on the top benefit from a slight bit of pressing, after which I can remove the thread tracing. I did also start a bit of hand sewing off camera, but I didn't film it to, well, save some time. It is now the end of the day and I got the top done as far as I wanted it to get, which means that it's still not completely done. The top edge still needs to be hemmed a tiny bit, but that's only this bit and I think we can do that in a hotel room. The fact that now the edges are done means that I won't need to bring any pins and I can make do with just a few needles. And I want to bring as little sharp objects as possible because I'm only flying with hand luggage and I don't want to get picked out and have everything thrown away. So hopefully this will be enough. But that means right now I can finish packing the last bits of my stuff and we're ready to go. So originally I hadn't really planned filming going into the city today as I just wanted to get some train tickets and some really important supermarket items. But apparently I went into the city at a rather interesting time. But anyway, personally I didn't really notice much of it and I did find a really awesome restaurant that had way too awesome dumplings. Food was good, cocktail was good. But regarding that very important supermarket item, as a Dutch person, of course I have to try salmiakki. Let's see if it's just like licorice. Yep, it is. And it's actually the kind of licorice that I like, which is really good. Guess I gotta stock up on a few bags. And with that, after thoroughly enjoying the sauna, because heck, I am in Finland, of course I booked a hotel with sauna, I'm gonna do a tiny bit of hand sewing, and I think I'm gonna call it an early night, because I am tired. Tomorrow is gonna be another busy day. Because I decided that if I'm going to fly to Finland for a LARP, I might as well play the tourist for a bit. So after this, I had another full day to myself. And my standard, I don't really know what to do in a city, is to see if there are any botanical gardens nearby. So yes, special interest tangent incoming, because well, I did study biology after all. And it turns out I was spoiled, as there was a rhododendron garden 10 minutes walk from my hotel. It wasn't in season, but irregardless it was set up in a really nice way. And as it is a university affiliated project, there are plenty of interesting information signs as well on these very nice walkways. Then I decided to go back into the city of Helsinki because there is a very big botanical garden right next to the station. And this is one of the coolest botanical gardens I have ever seen. Another nice bonus of going on this day was that it was quite hot, so being able to have a nice stroll under the trees was very welcome. As for the garden, at first it seemed like a pretty regular botanical garden, although I did pass by a really cool bit where they even showcased lichens. But then, when walking into the main area, it was one of the most awesome setups ever, as they had visualized the entire evolutionary tree of plants in a very physical and clear way. It started with a sign at the base of the evolutionary tree, and from there were all these paths representing the branches, leading to plant beds representing the leaves. It really showcased all of the lineages, divergences, and what made each group distinct. You could walk the paths all along the tree, and in that way follow all of the evolution that happened. It's just that I can get very stoked about nature education being presented in such a vivid and straightforward physical way. Next to it was another smaller garden, showcasing how plants work on all 5 senses. I'm sad smell doesn't translate well through video, because well, they sure managed to make it smell absolutely amazing. It was also planted in such a way that there were relevant plants blooming in most of the year. The gardens are set up around these beautiful greenhouses, and while the garden itself is free to enter, the greenhouses do ask a small admittance fee. These were also pretty nice. No grand educational setups, but still pretty nice greenhouses with a really cool variety of plants. It was especially cool to see that they had welwitchias, which you don't see very often. Although, apparently they could have had more if it wasn't for the mice. So yes, I won't bore you any longer with the garden tangent, but I did geek out just a bit about these, so I did kinda want to share them. After that, I had a nice stroll through the rest of the city centre, which was pretty pedestrian friendly. And then I ended up sitting down in the harbour for quite a while and eating some early dinner. Retiring to the hotel room early as well, because I was again very tired and I still had some reading up to do for the Larp. Then it was the day of the Larp. Packing up stuff a second time always seems more difficult than the first, but I left on time as a few of the players decided to meet for lunch at a cafe. As many international people are flying in for this Larp, they arrived well on time, so having a pre-meet made sense. There I could already meet a few people, after which we took the bus to the venue, which is a primary school building. After checking into the Larp and while waiting for the workshops to get started, I took out the top and the sewing supplies, and while chatting to the other Larpers, I finally finished the costume. Perfectly in time for the Larp, or something. So with that done and the Larp nearly ready to get started, I'll give you some sneak peeks of the costume, which was super comfy to wear and perfect with how warm it was. And look at how awesomely they transformed the school. But I won't go into that in much further for now, as the story of the Larp itself definitely deserves its own video. So that will have to wait for another time. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.